Property prices in Australia have steadily grown in most of its major cities for decades now. However, in the past 2 years or so, prices have jumped pretty dramatically, which I'm sure is concerning for anyone who's in the market to make a purchase. What's even more concerning and seems to be flying under the radar is the amount of reported debt that home buyers are taking on, which grew by over 80% in the last year alone. So let's talk about it. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Reese. The idea for today's video came about from another video I recently made talking about the recent changes to lending here in Australia and how that would affect people's ability to borrow money to purchase property. I did some digging because I wanted to find out how Australia's household debt compares to other types of debt within the country. And what I found was pretty interesting and somewhat scary if I don't say so myself. So I wanted to start here with this article, which provides some good key insights into what's going on within the market. It talks about how household debt has steadily risen over the past 3 decades and how Australians have moved towards a more heavily weighted credit-based lifestyle, which simply means that Australians are choosing to borrow more money and take on more personal debt than they probably should in order to fund their lifestyles. Where this trend has seen Australians take on some of the highest personal debt to income levels in the world, ranking us 4th as shown here on this chart. The article then goes on to break down this personal debt into 5 main categories: mortgages, investor debt, personal debt, student loans, and credit card debt. And it has definitions for all of them here. The 2 main categories I want you to pay careful attention to are mortgages and investor debt. Combined, they make up almost 93% of Australia's personal debt, and this was as of 2016. I can only assume that that amount would have grown significantly since then as well, considering not much has changed in the way I've seen how people do their business here in Australia. And with the current influx in prices for homes and the way people are jumping into these mortgages, I would not be surprised if this number had increased since then as well. And this is where it gets interesting in my opinion. The article then goes on to try and justify the difference between good and bad debt. And it puts the argument forward that the whopping 93% of debt just mentioned is classed as good debt, but then puts a disclaimer in there, and it's of something that I believe often gets overlooked when people decide to take on huge amounts of debt. I'm actually really glad that they chose to incorporate it in here, and I'm going to read it one for one. Whether we have good or bad debt, there is always a degree of risk involved. If circumstances change or if you have borrowed beyond your means, then it could be difficult to sustain any debt over the long term. This can lead to defaults and more serious issues such as bankruptcy if that happens. Any good debt will then quickly go bad. And they also follow it up right at the very end that Australia's personal debt is often viewed as a major risk for both individuals and the country's economy. This is the main thing I wanted to focus on in today's video. Australia's personal debt is amongst the highest in the world when compared to GDP. And the fact that the majority of it is made up of personal home loans and investment loans, and it's being called out as being okay because property makes a good investment or wealth building investment is kind of scary. And yes, property definitely makes specific individuals very wealthy. However, investing in property is technically not a good productive investment for the economy. Kind of sidestepping here, building a business within Australia is definitely not a common aspect of investment culture, which is a bad thing for the growth of an economy. For strong economic growth, you really want people to adopt the mindset to get ahead by doing something productive, like producing and innovating products and services that people actually want, which in turn would increase economic output. Property investment, on the other hand, does not provide either a product or a service, even though it would be widely argued that it produces both of these things. This is because the customers for property, whether they are someone who is wanting to purchase the home or simply rent out the home from the current owner, are going to churn the income they earn from other businesses into the current owner's pocket, where that owner is going to pay a small amount of tax to the government on the sale or the income generated from rent, where the money earned from that sale or rent is not a transaction that provided a productive product or service to its customer. My main concern with this is that a very small percentage of people get to build their wealth through these tactics, where the rest of the remaining people seem to be left behind and they end up getting impacted by the negative effects that the market has on the economy. And the topic of those negative effects is worth a video in its own, so I'm not going to go into them today. Anyway, this is one of the main reasons why I think these lending restrictions, where they're starting to now be introduced here in Australia, is a good thing. In the short term, it's most likely going to affect first home buyers, which is a bad thing, of course, but in the long run, theoretically, it should limit the amount of money that investors are able to borrow to stop them from leveraging up to their tits and taking on too much debt that they theoretically aren't going to be able to service in the instance of interest rates booming and other scenarios that can definitely play out and have played out, like back in 2007, 2008 when the GFC happened. And if you were interested in learning more about the new lending restrictions that have come into play, I have made a video talking about it and I've linked it down in the description below. Feel free to check that out after this one, like I said, if you are interested. And while you were down there, if you could do me a massive favor, hit that like and subscribe button. I really do appreciate the support. It really does go a long way and it definitely helps the channel grow. So thank you in advance. If you could go ahead and do that, I would really appreciate it. I guess to wrap this video up, it is very clear that people are greedy and will take whatever they can to build their wealth. And I don't see why they wouldn't abuse the system if they have the option to. It just makes sense to put yourself in a better position by using what is available to you right now. It makes sense for people to do it. I'm just pointing out that people are greedy. Low interest rates, FOMO, and insane growth in the market would have investors licking their lips. Not only investors, but everything that flows into the sale of a property, like construction, developers, real estate agents, you name it. And I guarantee that a lot of them would have made an insane amount of money over the past few years. However, economies have definitely seen the negative impacts that irresponsible lending can have. And I think that the tightening of lending in Australia in particular is going to be a good thing because it's going to stop people from digging themselves into a hole that they can't get out of. I think that's a good thing. So finally, there are two key points that if you take anything from this video, take these from this video. They are the most important things to understand. Firstly, it is very important to understand the amount of debt that you can comfortably sustain if interest rates were to rise significantly overnight, or let's say you were to lose your job tomorrow. Understand that the amount of money that you're capable of borrowing, are you able to service it in a worst case scenario? It's a really, really important thing to consider. It's a really important thing to calculate. You should be able to work it out based on your income, based on your living situation, based on your lifestyle, based on your budget. Work it out, understand it before taking on huge amounts of debt. And secondly, understand that investing in property is risky business, especially for those who are intending to purchase houses and sell them for a profit in the near future, as the growth that Australia has seen in the property market could always take a quick turn and then actually impact people's ability to sell those houses where they would theoretically lose out, like we saw what happened in the 2007-2008 GFC. And that's about it for today's video. I really wanted to touch on the conversation of how property is once again probably going to threaten economies, especially the ones who rely heavily on this industry. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it was insightful. I hope you learned something. And if you did, please hit that like and subscribe button down below. Like I said earlier, I really do appreciate the support. With that being said, have a good day, have a good week. And as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.